Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. It is George VAFC here. Today we're going to be talking about central running power. We're going to be talking, what do I mean by that? So we're going to.
Am I that annoying to listen to? Do you think, as coming from? I
Listen,
wonder.
the comments will say.
You know what it is? I feel like Americans and Canadians have the worst potential accent. If you're going to go around the world, I think Italians, Spanish, British, of course,
Worst accent.
Australian. Don't you think Americans and Canadians have the worst, most jarring response?
Do you know what it is? I think you guys are quite an easy. Canadians get lumped in. I don't think that's fair, but it's quite an easy target because some people in America are very loud with the way they speak, right?
Yes.
Just that the general volume feels like this is a massive, generalization. Not trying to offend any of our American listeners. Jesus Christ. Yeah, maybe that. But what do you think? What's like the most annoying British accent that you've heard?
Like maybe a Liverpool accent.
Yeah, you don't like it.
I don't know if I like it.
Oh, really? It's too squeaky.
It's a little, it's really squeaky. I find it, and I just I'll be honest, I find it tougher to understand them.
That's okay, because some people sometimes I usually comment to get this yank off or whatever.
Yeah.
What's from an American Canadian perspective? Is there British who you're like, I won't listen to you about football?
I feel like a deep Merseyside. Honestly, I don't even know how to do it.
Try it.
No, I can't. It's
say chicken and a can of Coke.
Sorry.
Say chicken and a can of Coke.
Chicken and a can of Coke.
Welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. As you can tell, Bhavs is not here. It's unhinged. Unfortunately, Bhavs can't be here again today. We wish you well. But we do have me and George here to chat some. I think we'll talk about football. Maybe Arsenal today, maybe, for a change.
Maybe a bit.
And we do have some Arsenal to discuss because Thomas Partey has returned to full training for about 6 minutes. So, if he got through today, then we could be good. We'll see tomorrow.
No gender reveals, right? He's already got his kid, so I mean, we'll have a thigh for about a minute.
Was that real? That thing about him kicking a ball at a gender reveal or something?
Well, he did it, but he definitely didn't injure himself doing that. Okay, but still, it is fun. It is fun.
Yes.
To poke fun. You have to laugh and cry because the situation is legitimately so painful. You look back on the impact that it could have, the what if scenario. There's that brilliant what is it, the Marvel what if situations where they have their main characters. American listeners will know that, so that's another one for the American guys. But essentially, this idea about what does our season look like with Thomas Partey, and I think it's so tough. But you have to start this conversation with, can we please put the situation around him to one side and talk football?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get into the moral quandaries about it because I feel like it's really obvious where to stand on that morally. But to talk pure football and to keep it there, I just think it's so important. It's so important. And we talk about receiving within a block. We talk about all these things about what Arsenal are doing. You see these statistics coming out, by the way, in terms of us having the most touches in the box. But perhaps when you have a look at it, how many of those touches are in more central areas? Who can help us do that? How many times can we, effectively switch a ball and have somebody to almost control the middle of the park in the same way? I look at this dynamic between Xhaka and Partey, and I look at what a Rice Partey dynamic could look like, and I get really excited. And it's just, there are a lot of football impact that Thomas Partey could have, both in a Champions League context and a Premier League context. And I almost think it's as simple as saying, if you were to have this this man fit for 10 to
I love when people get annoyed
games.
at you about that. It's so random.
It's so random. But if you were to have Thomas Partey fit for guaranteed 15 out of the last 20 games of the season, I would almost be very confident about putting Arsenal in the conversation to be with Man City as favorites. And that is the level of impact that we talk about, right?
So how do you quantify that? Because I feel the same. I look at what Partey does, and the springiness of the attack that can come through that central hub, his ability to stop transitions, his progressive passing, all of those things that we saw, like when he is at his best, I see that and I feel that too. But how do you quantify what we lost? And just playing the other side a little bit, other teams lose players. And I feel like losing Thomas Partey is like worse than Liverpool losing Thiago, and is worse than like City. For some reason, it feels worse than City losing De Bruyne, because even though De Bruyne has, I'm sure I'll get cooked for it, but De Bruyne has that level of sort of final third quality that no one else has. City have so much quality up there in those attacking positions that they can in some way cover for it. It feels like we have no one who can do what Partey can do. Do you know what I mean? They can approximate what De Bruyne does, even if it's not the level. It feels like we don't have what Partey has without him. So where do you think it's even worth quantifying in points?
I do, because if you were to look at each team, what is their inevitability factor? And for me, when Thomas Partey plays with Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, Arsenal have an inevitability to control the midfield in a way no other team in this league does. That is our inevitability. In terms of City, in terms of Liverpool, these guys have physical output machines, and so I really wouldn't talk about Kevin De Bruyne and Haaland and excuse that from the output. I wouldn't talk about Liverpool, who do miss Thiago. He's clearly a world-class player, but honestly, you take Mohamed Salah out of that team, you take out Trent Alexander-Arnold out of that team, that's their inevitability, right? But from an Arsenal perspective, if you were to compete with Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, and Martin Odegaard in any midfield, there's a certain inevitability that Arsenal will win the midfield battle. So that's where the conversation should come from for me, because our attack doesn't prioritize superstars. In fact, the whole idea that this attack was built on multiple players contributing. That's how we reached our highest levels. Liverpool and I'd argue Manchester City, although they have brilliant structures in their own right, they are more individual based in terms of where they place their emphasis on. They place their emphasis on individuals coming through for them. So that would be my retort, in a sense, between the two.
Yeah. This is why I love you, George. It's good analysis is like, I think, of anything, is being able to... I absolutely love this guy at the moment called Alain de Botton, who's like this sort of philosopher dude. And he just says things in a way and you go, that's it. And it's about sort of personal development and growth and stuff. And he's like, just what he says, you're like, oh, that's it. You've somehow put words to what I was feeling. And you're absolutely bang on. The inevitability of, even though we've never seen it, of having Partey, Rice, and Odegaard in a midfield, you go out there going, I don't see another midfield able to deal with that. And that's our inevitability factor. Yeah, it's like, because other teams can approximate other injuries, but you can't approximate a Mohamed Salah. You can't do that. So when you remove that, it is the inevitability factor that's bang on. Where I'm going to put you to the sword, because we've got hosting rights.
Please do it.
Where do you think we are, points wise and table wise, if we have Thomas Partey from the beginning of the season? And are we being delusional? Do you think this is just based on us being Arsenal fans and thinking that this guy is unbelievable, even though he is?
No, because I mean, here, you know what I relate it to? Let's say it's almost as though if we were to lose, perhaps like somebody like Gabriel, who for Arsenal is an incredibly important player. But the backup to that is somebody in Kivior, who is an unknown. It would crush Arsenal, but it wouldn't change our ability to play. Partey does change our ability to play.
Yeah, I agree.
And so when you look at it, if Liverpool were to lose Trent Alexander-Arnold, there is nobody, even Bradley, for as good as he's young, that will change Liverpool in their identity the same way. There is nobody that, like, losing a Haaland or a Kevin De Bruyne can change their identity. Of course, losing a Grealish, losing a Foden, losing an Alvarez, like, it hurts. Losing a John Stones, it hurts. But it doesn't change who they are. And I think that we've seen it this year. I mean, everybody's bemoaning the fact that Arsenal have changed their identity. And that's what Thomas Partey does. That's the impact of losing a player like that, in my opinion. And it's with Granit Xhaka. I don't think you can divorce the two. But still, I think Thomas Partey is that important for who Arsenal believe themselves to be, broadly. And it is, for example, for me, it is Mikel's fundamental philosophy difference to Pep, to Klopp. Like, when I look at this stuff, right, Klopp, for me, how he's organized his midfield, look at the buys. McAllister, Szoboszlai, You've got Curtis Jones already. There's a collection of 8s at Liverpool. That's been their decision in terms of the recruitment. Look at Pep, Kovacic, Nunez. Who else did they buy? There's another one that I'm forgetting this past season. Doku. Yes. Their midfield revamp in terms of losing Gundogan was to get carriers, but again, 8s. How many 8s are in Arsenal? There aren't. So it's a very different philosophy. When we have a collection of 6s and a collection of 10s. So I think, but it's been very much purposefully created that way. People use that as a stick to beat Arsenal with, but that's just a philosophy to how Mikel approaches football, and it's very different to the other two. So if you're going to lose the best player or one of the best players to allow you to play that way, it's going to really affect your ability to see your vision. And that's what I think it represents to me. And
how many points?
That. Oh, how many points? No, I think we would be top of the league, personally. I think you look at the points that we've dropped and the manner in how we've dropped them. I don't think Thomas Partey allows you to stop and do those things. I mean, you look at West Ham, you look at Fulham, you look at drop points to Fulham more than anything. When you look at the plan in general,
Fulham,
it's ridiculous because what was it? It was 3, and then was it 2? Have we lost? Is it 5 points or 4 points that we've lost?
4 points to Fulham. Yeah, we drew and then lost.
It's ridiculous. Like, come on. Like, when you think about it, that is the level that I think we do. I even look at Chelsea, mate. Like, Thomas Partey's there. Do I think I lose or I don't win that game convincingly? I look at Spurs. I look at, again, I said West Ham. What was another one? Like, I feel those game states, they completely change with Partey. Now, I don't know how many points we would have. I think that's up for debate because, I mean, just because Thomas Partey's there doesn't guarantee that these points swing. But I do feel that Arsenal, who have also, by the way, been the team in the league to concede the fewest amount of goals in the last 15 minutes, that is huge. And I start to say, okay, well, if we're not going to do that, and we've already done that without Thomas Partey, what does Thomas Partey give you in those 75 to 85 minutes in an attacking sense? Because we've already proven that defensively the team is there, okay? What does he give you? And he gives you a whole lot, mate. Like, I don't see a player that's able to give us the same ability to receive in a block, bar maybe Emile Smith-Rowe on the half turn, but that's farther up. It has nothing to do with how we approach build-up play or tempo or variation. It's huge. It is a big thing for me.
And move things through centrally. I look at the, it's also about different options of, it's not even just the fact that he might start. It's just having different options and going like, here's how we can play in a different way and go, right, okay, today they're sat in a really, when we had that sort of period, I guess it was sort of September, October, where we're talking about, how do we break down low blocks? We can do more of what we did. I felt against Palace was sit back a little bit more, invite them out and play through them in a different way, which has to be through carrying and progressive passing, which is Partey's bread and butter. So yeah, it's hard to quantify. I agree. It's kind of, I do think we'd be 5-6 points better off, which is the difference between, being top of the league and being wherever we are, 4th, 3rd. So I don't look at the league table, mate. I don't even care. Yeah, it's just the question of fitness, but that is, it's such a tired conversation at this point that it's probably not even worth having. Do we think there's big impact to come from Vieira and Timber? Obviously, we've got some news coming that Timber supposedly will be back in training. Again, it's difficult to know who to believe. They're always reports, but I was always pretty confident. I think I said inside of the podcast, I was pretty sure he'd be back at least in training by the end of February or maybe mid-February, and that's sounding like the right thing. We don't know, of course, but broadly, putting that all that aside, what level of impact do you think we can expect from a Timber and from a Vieira towards the end of the season if they can stay fit?
I mean, you could become really technical and say, what does Vieira give you in low blocks? He gives you the best arguable final ball in the squad. So there's a segment of that. I just think that his sample to date means that it's very difficult for you to prop that as a consistent output. So I think like he can change a game, but what's that worth? Maybe a couple points here and there. And that's also based on trust. That's also based on who he's getting minutes over. There's a lot more factors. Now, Timber, on the other hand, Timber is one of the most versatile players in the squad. He has a far bigger impact than I think Vieira. He's equally as important as Thomas Partey. I don't think you can separate these two in terms of the impact on Arsenal in terms of the press.
Do you think that's mad, though, that he's played 45 minutes?
No. I think it sucks that he has, but I mean, in terms of putting that on the boy, like, again, I would argue, name another player in world football that can play inverted right back, inverted left back, has had versatility in terms of central back or central center back, has had versatility in terms of playing in midfield. Name me another player in world football, bar maybe your Caicedos, that give a team that level of competency. You could argue Tomiyasu, another one that's a really big, versatile piece. He just allows you to play in so many different ways that very few people and players in the world can. Now, I don't think that means then that he's the best in a particular position, but he certainly gives you a level of competency and trust that for a manager who loves to tinker, and maybe too much for fans to appreciate, that becomes important.
The thing I'd say about that, the Partey thing, I'm convinced, again, it's always with the caveat if he can stay fit, but because I don't see the qualities that he has in any other midfielder in our team, and we've seen a massive sample of that, right? The Timber thing, I also think there's caveats worth saying about his injury in terms of that recovery and how that might seem. We just don't know how he's going to adapt to football, all that sort of stuff. I do. In theory, it's great. And in theory, I agree with you. But I think until we've seen him do that for Arsenal, it's going to be very hard, which not to say you're wrong, but it's going to be very hard to convince a lot of fans that is the impact we're going to see in the second half of the season. Look, we love what we saw in pre-season. We love what we saw in that 45 minutes against Nottingham Forest. And I think there's so much more to come from him. I think he could have been so useful.
It was good enough to drop Gabriel. Like, this is what I will say. The newest signing that we saw maybe 45 minutes, and I don't think we want this long term, but it was enough of an impact for Mikel to drop one of the first build-up pieces in his project. Not just his team, but his project. I think that's significant. It was enough to cause doubt in the manager's mind for that.
I don't disagree with that at all. I just think my point was more about the impact in the second half of the season. I think I have maybe more question marks because I look at, as I say, the recovery from injury. I look at the fact that the small sample size. In theory, I agree with all of these things in the sense that his positional versatility, the carry he can do, how sharp he is in the tackle, all those things that we saw.
Oh yeah, I'm just speaking tactically. Like, I mean, you don't know how he's going to return, of course, and all those fitness concerns.
And this is my point: is that that's why I'm less convinced about Timber having a massive impact in the second half of the season. I think he will have an impact. I think what's maybe interesting about Timber is to kind of play little bit more of a what if with Timber and go, if Timber is fit from the beginning of the season to now, what conversations have we had on this podcast instead of the conversations we had? And of course we're playing what ifs or whatever, but I do think they're worth having because I do think maybe they inform something moving forward. What conversations are we having about Ben White? What conversations are we having about the impact on Declan Rice? What conversations are we having about the impact on Gabriel, Zinchenko, all these guys who there's more question marks. And that's what, for the second half of the season with Timber, I think he can have an impact, but I'm more interested about maybe what the question marks he would have brought up had he been fit.
So, for example, we saw Thomas Partey be an inverted right back.
Thanks for checking out the Cannon Podcast. To hear the full episode, sign up as a YouTube member on this channel or go to patreon.com/thecannonpod.